So, first of all, I think it's important to say that um, we'll have a lot of stress in life. There's a lot of stress going on at the moment, but I think if we could take a moment just to put all the other stuff that's going on in our heads outside and just focus on what my friend here has to say, because he's had a lot of experiences that hopefully a lot of us can relate to, but more than that, can be a big inspiration for all of us. So, yeah, I'm interviewing Jim Matthews. I don't know how best to describe you, but definitely my personal inspiration. Internationalist freedom fighter, is that a bad way to describe you? When you break it down to that?
I haven't really thought about it, to be honest, Morgan. I don't know.
Just for people.
I'm your friend. I suppose I've been involved in a few different things. Yeah, international, I suppose.
Well,
activist, I suppose. I used to use that term at one time.
Yeah. But you don't use it now?
I feel like I got the right to. I mean, I haven't really been involved in very much lately. I do some volunteering locally. But I suppose I've always been a bit of a part-timer.
Well, it's a difficult word to define activist. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that call themselves that for very little reason, so
that's true.
It's quite ambiguous. But in terms of all that, how did you get started? Tell me about growing up and that sort of thing. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Stoke on Trent. Not an extraordinary childhood. I don't think. Joined the army when I was about 19. Spent 4 years in the military, and then.
What pushed you to join the army at 19?
I mean, Stoke on Trent in the 80s and early 90s. I don't know, not to run the place down, but there were fewer prospects and opportunities there than there are now, I think. And that might have been part of it. Also, I wasn't really very good at sticking to things and making things work. I was a bit of an antisocial teenager at that age, actually. And I tried a few sort of menial jobs and, spent a bit of time just deciding on not really doing much, dropped out of college. And I think I just wanted to throw myself into something, a bit unknown, very sort of unlike me at that time of my life, and just see how it sort of played out, I suppose. And something that would last as well. And to get out, just to get out. I think a lot of people join the military to just get out of wherever they are. And then maybe look back at it a bit more kindly after having that experience.
And so school wasn't for you then?
At that time, no, it wasn't. I didn't have a very nice time at school, and I don't think I was a very teachable or likable teenager. Really, I wouldn't like to have been one of my teachers when I was at school. Again, it was a different time. No, I didn't do very well at school. After I left the army, I went to university. I was much more appreciative of education.
And you were very much able to do very well in school. So evidentially, so what do you think held you back then?
No, really.
I mean, you were telling me that the corporal punishment still. Did you say like?
Oh, they give you a smack, and there were rare occasions of children having the cane. I think it was actually illegal at that time, but yeah, I think with the parents' permission, you could still have the cane. But no, teachers would still, hit you quite liberally. But they weren't. I don't think they were brutal. I suppose I didn't really have I think my domestic picture, at home, I won't really go into detail now, which was quite turbulent, and that made me sort of act out at school. And I was a bit awkward, a bit antisocial, and I was quite unhappy, I suppose, and had problems.
I understand that.
Joining the military, was quite good for me at that time of my life. Regardless of politics and the British Army's role and responsibilities in the world. I think for a lot of people who come from a difficult background, the military can do a great deal
for them. We're not worried about politics all around the world. If you need to get out, you need to get out. And speaking of political views and that sort of thing, was there anything that you can remember from that age, like pre-joining the army, that gave you some of this perspective that you have now in life, or some of the moral perspective maybe, if not political?
I remember on the run up to the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, I would have been about 15. And I remember there was a moment when it, among all the drum banging and the jingoism and the fervour to go into Iraq and liberate the Kuwaitis, as it was sold to us. I remember there was a moment when we hovered on the brink of a climb down, and this war might be averted after all. And a British Tory politician, in an interview on the news, voiced the view that it would be a shame to let the troops down now. Having built them all up, it would be a shame not to let them go in. And I remember going to school the next day and everybody repeating that idea. Teachers, parents, other kids, keeping the course of bloodshed and horrendous, wide-scale killing and destruction on the table for a complete non-reason. And it just seemed like it's a time of international crisis, and there's this banality, there's this absence of thought has taken hold. And I remember finding that quite scarifying. There's a sense of powerlessness that goes along with that. So that was something that I think quite impressed me. I mean, or maybe odd that I went and joined the army after that. But when you asked me about politics and about the wanting to sort of make a difference or make a change, I think moments like that can have an impact.
I can understand.
Maybe everybody has a moment like that from something or other. I don't know.
I'm sure people have quite a few moments. So you'd say it was quite a militaristic community that you're in then, because I know generally down here in London, obviously, I can't really remember that.
Which community? Sorry.
When you say that, when you went back into school and the teachers and the students were all very disappointed for the soldiers, because there was quite a big resistance to it.
I'm not sure they were militaristic, but no, during the first Gulf War there wasn't that massive resistance. Certainly not in my town. That we saw on the run up to the second Gulf War with millions of protesters. I'm not aware that even happened. I think there probably was something, but there was far less of it on the run up to the first Gulf War. For whatever reason, whether it's because Iraq had invaded and occupied another country, and it seemed there was more of a case for war in the first Gulf War, whether that's the reason or not. In terms of my own community, no, they weren't militaristic, but they were quite sort of parochial with that sort of small town mentality, and not really, I don't think, questioning things and challenging things and second guessing the establishment and the authorities wasn't that much of a premium where I grew up at all.
I don't think it is in most places, to be honest.
Possibly not.
In schools and that. So you joined the army in 19. How was that?
Well, like I say, at that age, it did do a lot for me. I mean, obviously, I didn't completely embrace the strictness and the lack of independence and the lack of encouragement to personal initiative and so on, which is all quite part and parcel of military life. But it did give me a structure, and it gave me stuff to do in the day, and I found I was good at army stuff, the fitness and the soldiering side of things. I found I was actually, surprisingly enough to me at the time, quite good at. And I went from being a bit of a teenage layabout and quite antisocial to having a sense of achievement, I suppose, and let's say physical fitness and there was travel involved, a bit of money in your pocket, all those things, yeah, it did a lot for me at that time. As the years went on, it came to feel a bit more and more restrictive, actually, a bit more like a cage. That structure was good at the beginning, but I didn't need it 4 years down the line. I was thinking more about, getting out, getting an education, and doing something different.
I can understand that. Well, tell me about some of the best experiences you had, like some of the really good memories you have from those times, just in the army.
In the military,
With friends, going to nice places.
Yeah, the travel. I mean, I went to Bosnia. That was interesting. I wouldn't say it was always nice, but it wasn't during the time of the real major fighting in Bosnia. There was a bit of spatting going on. So it was interesting to see another country. Yeah, the friends and the social life and some of the camaraderie and the laughs and so on. Again, the military does give you a bit of a sense of achievement and a bit of a sense of self, a sense of
So what was it that made you decide you couldn't do it anymore? That you had enough? It was too much.
Well, I was never going to stay that long. I don't think I was never going to be, a career soldier. I mean, I've got mates who, a lot of them got back in touch with me recently, and they've been in the army all this time. They've done their 22, even longer, years, and good for them. But I was never going to be like that. I would never have had all the other experiences I've had if I just stayed in the army. I don't think. So, I mean, I went in just to the minimum term then. I don't know what it is now, but it was 3 years. And for me, 3 years is like a bloody lifetime. At 19 years old, when I was thinking about it. And so I thought, I'll throw myself into this and we'll just see how it goes. But, there's no way. Even 3 years is sort of slightly daunting, really. And I stayed for 4.
Oh.
And then, as I say, by the end, it was just enough. I'd had enough. And I wanted to get an education and go to university. And
so you already knew that's exactly what you were going to do once you got out?
I'd be considered a few times over the years, whether to stay longer, whether to make a go of it and a career of it. But no, I don't think I was ever really going to.
But you knew as soon as you got out of the army that uni was your plan?
I was already planning it in my last year. I did an open university course because I didn't have A-levels. I didn't do well enough at school, and my GCSEs were rubbish as well. So I took a module out of an open university degree, just one module from it. And I managed to scrape a basic pass on that, and I used that to get into university.
And how was that? What was your experiences going into uni? What age were you when you went to uni? That was 23, 22?
24.
24.
Yeah, I went to Anglia Polytechnic University in Cambridge. I studied English and European philosophy and literature.
How was that?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, as I say, in the army, I didn't always have the same interests as the other blokes, and a lot of the time I just want to sort of read by myself. Someone thought I was a bit weird with all these books, but that was what I used to do in my spare time. So the idea of doing that for an occupation, for another 3 years, seemed fantastic, and it was fantastic.
You have a 3-year term,
yeah.
Plan your life in 3-year stages.
Yeah. And not by design. That was just the deal, and it was brilliant. Great student life, really interesting. All the books I was interested in, to write about, your thoughts on these books, and get somebody else, an expert, to discuss with, and you have the conversations that I didn't have in the army. You don't really talk about Voltaire and Kafka and Proust and Dostoevsky with other soldiers most of the time. Not exclusively. Sometimes you might meet somebody who's got similar interests, but really that hadn't been part of army life. And so I really appreciate education when I was older, having had that other experience in a way that I didn't when I was at school. And of course, when you're at school, you're made to go, and it's forced on you, so that makes it different as well.
So it's good to get as much different perspective as you can, whenever you can. So was that uni that you started to get more politically aware then?
Yeah. Not so much through meeting other students, though. Funnily, it just occurred at the same time. There were one or two other students at uni that were involved in things. There was a group called People and Planet, I seem to remember, and there were one or two others that went to one or two anti-globalisation protests, and one even went out to Palestine. But really, my involvement, it didn't happen again. I think that was it. A group of us were going to go down to London for one of the Reclaim the Streets protests, and this was 2000, I think. And as it turned out, the next day, only I managed to get up out of bed in the morning. Everybody else had a hangover and they all cried off. So I went down by myself because I was really interested. I'd read about it on the run up to the day in the Guardian and stuff. These protesters, dig up Parliament Square and so on. And I ended up sort of getting a bit involved, and sort of I got the taste. And a few months later, that was it. The Zapatistas were the Mexican revolutionary group. The Zapatistas were traveling in caravan from their base in Chiapas in southern Mexico to Mexico City to speak in Congress with a huge sort of traveling entourage of supporters. And I read about it again. I just picked up the Guardian, and there it was on the cover. And I read about that, and the next thing I was checking my bank accounts, how much money have I got. And I flew over there and just found them in the middle of the night and ended up hooking up with them for. So it's things like that, really.
So that time, what was pulling you? Because that's a big step to go check whatever, book a ticket, try to get out there. Like, what was pulling you?
I think another friend of mine was studying at a different university in SOAS, and he was also, as an old friend, was also. He lived a much more sort of hippie life, really. When I got into the army, he'd been sort of, spending time on communes, living in a caravan and smoking dope and writing poetry. And so he was one of the few people I had these sorts of conversations with. And he was studying at SOAS at the same time I was studying at Anglia Poly. And so I chatted to him about this sort of thing, and to one or two other students. And I think I was just getting more and more interested in that side of things, really. That whole area, which I didn't really understand and seemed very interesting.
So you wanted to see it for yourself. You wanted
to
see more.
Yeah, that's as good a way to put it.
And how was it?
The Zapatista caravan was great. And then I think not long after that, it was Genoa. This was the time of the big anti-globalisation protests in Seattle and Prague, and there was one coming up in Genoa, port city in Italy, and it was the biggest of the lot. And so I went out there. Again, I went out by myself, but I quickly hooked up with a group called the Wombles, who were known as what they call a white overalls movement, which was something that actually started in Italy. A huge movement which started in these, what they call the social centres in Italy, these huge squatted centres, bases for activism and so on. And the white overalls is a tactic wherein everybody involved would wear white overalls and cover themselves in sort of homemade padding made out of sponge and bubble wrap and armour, and they put helmets on and try to push their way through police lines, not using weapons, not using violence, attracting violence, and thereby revealing where the violence was in the system, and so on. So there's a bit of theory to it, but really to enable protests to keep moving and not be, dispersed and just suppressed and cowed through police violence. And a UK group, a London-based group called the Wombles, was trying to replicate that. And so I hooked up with them. They went to Genoa, hooked up with them. And it was colossal violence in the streets on the day of on the direct action day in Genoa. And after that, I really, I felt like I'd found my tribe, if you like. These are the people that I want to, do stuff with, and it became very, very all-consuming, the activism. Before long, my whole social circle, everything I did, everything I was interested in was just activism. One protest, one action after another, one court case after another.
Well,
and so
what was it at first? Just to go back, what was it that made you say, like, these guys, the Wombles, I need to get more involved. I need to actually be a part of things.
Well, as I say, I was initially curious, and then through the experience of Genoa,
So you went out to Genoa with.
I went out by myself and I met them there.
They met them. And can you tell me a bit more about Genoa? Because I know you had some experiences that quite shaped you.
Genoa was a huge street protest. I mean, there were groups all around the city. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people had arrived from all over to participate in this protest. As I say, it was the rising tide of the anti-globalisation protests. There had been Seattle and Prague, and I think one or two others. Meetings of the IMF, meetings of the WTO. I would have to separate them in my mind now, but they were getting bigger and bigger. And the security forces, some of them have been caught completely on the hop, really off their guard. Centres have been overrun and so on. And so by January, it was really coming to a head in all kinds of ways. I mean, there were more attendees, more protesters than ever before. We're talking hundreds of thousands. And the security forces as well had upped their game and really decided we're going to break it here. And in Italy, and Greece the following year with a similar one actually. That was where it was, likely, to be a success for the security forces side of things because they're well used to dealing very brutally with protesters who also turn up, armed and very, very determined. So it's not so much like a street protest in London. It's much, much more hardcore and much more typically violent. I'd say Genoa was the biggest. And so
I think Genoa was best known for, like, with people, certainly even in my generation, for the death of Carlo Giuliani.
Carlo Giuliani, yes.
But I actually didn't find out about that until much later from some Italian comrades. Could you go into exactly what happened there?
Yeah. As I say, there were hundreds of thousands of people that arrived to participate in the protests in different ways. You had the so-called Black Bloc, with their black balaclavas and their super confrontational stance. They were the ones that would use bricks and petrol bombs and so forth. You had us, the white overalls guys, with our padding and armour and helmets, but notionally not prepared to actually use violence and weapons and so on, but prepared to resist. You had the pink and silver dancers and the fluffies and the hippies, and all kinds of other people protesting in different ways on the direct action day. And so people had tried to coordinate it as well as possible so these groups didn't mix and tread on each other's toes, but it didn't completely work out that way. Our group, the Tutti Bianchi, or the Yabasta, as they're sometimes known, were based in Carlini Stadium, tents pitched in the massive sort of pit. And on the morning of the direct action day, we got up, got into our homemade armour. It had been the whole stadium had been a production line of people making shields and armour and padding and stuff on the days before. Some of these shields were on big metal A-frames on wheels, wheeled by 3 or 4 people at once. Others were huge polycarbonate sheets chained together. And then we'd made serried rows, of these different huge shields. And then behind them, you had people with individual shields. And it was something quite sort of medieval, really. People have been practicing making that Roman testudo sort of tortoise shell design for all-round protection. And so on, and so it was quite a determined and organised scenario. We set off and marched, down the hill, and the police came out at the bottom of the hill, riot vans, water cannon, tooled up riot cops. Police helicopters came overhead, dropped tear gas bombs down onto us. And very soon it was chaos. People at the front streaming back, the massive shields falling over, and so on. After that initial shock, people shut themselves down and got back into it. Made sure the masks were fitted, and picked up the organisation of it again. I made my way to the front, and there was a standoff between us and the police for a while. They were firing tear gas rockets up at us. We were picking them up, throwing them back, or just throwing them onto the train tracks, which ran along down the side of the road. And then it broke up into a series of smaller battles in the side streets. It sort of disintegrated, and it was just chaos everywhere. After that static face-off, part of what caused that was the black bloc. Actually, came in from a side street on the left. We hadn't been expecting them. Pushed the cops about 200 metres down the hill, and then, as I say, it sort of broke up and disintegrated. And I just remember running down the side street and seeing a little pitch battle over a barricade, a mini barricade across a road of just junk. And I think a couple of cars had been bounced out into the air. Cops were throwing rocks and stones and bottles at the protesters. Protesters were throwing rocks and stones and bottles at the cops. And then the police turned and ran. I followed them, and it came out into this square, Via Tolomei. No, I beg your pardon, that was the name of the road. Piazza Alemanda was the name of the square. And I saw two police jeeps, and they were stuck and surrounded by protesters. The protesters were battering these jeeps from all sides, smashing things into the windows. There was a guy with a long plank of wood, ramming it through a window, a cop inside like this. And so I ran up. I managed to acquire one of these shields. Some guy had been overcome with tear gas, and so he dropped it and ran, so I picked his shield up. And I got behind the jeep and faced the crowd, and I had the rocks coming in, and I was screaming at them to stop. And the next thing, this is where it gets a bit fuzzy, because I heard a bang, but I didn't register what it was at the time, because things had been going bang all day. Someone else had burnt out a vehicle earlier on in the day, and the petrol tank had blown. But everybody suddenly drew back. I thought it was because of me, because I was shouting at them to pull back. And I drew back with them. And then I started trying to flag the police out, now's your chance. And then someone tapped me on the arms and just pointed down at the wheels. I had such tunnel vision because of my mask and my respirator and my helmet that I hadn't even seen that lying behind the wheels of the Jeep was Carlo Giuliani, a guy I didn't know, never met him before. And so I started yelling, no, don't, after all, stop. One of the Jeeps pulled away and zipped off. The other one was still there with Carlo behind the wheels. And then it reversed right over him. Drove forward over him again, bouncing up over him both times. I'll never forget it. And just fucked off. I ran straight up, started trying to give him CPR. A few other protesters came around. I didn't want to move his mask. His mask was one of the balaclavas which doesn't have a mouth hole. I didn't want to move it because the blood was just pouring out of his eye, like fucking tap water. Checked for his breathing, checked for his pulse, Looked up and there was a bunch of journos stood around me, all clicking with the cameras, and I was just yelling for an ambulance, for a medic. And then a phalanx of riot cops just stormed into us, and they came so close that, I was like, oh, I can't help him. I'll be no good to him or myself, if they get hold of me. Which was borne out later by footage of cops just smashing people to pieces, jumping up and down, and people covered in blood and so on. And so at that point we all ran. And the last thing I remember before I made it back up onto the main street again, where everybody was just drifting back up to the stadium in defeat, was these cops fanning out to close off that side street we'd just run up. And almost dancing up and down, waving the batons in the air and cheering. We went back to the stadium, and then the news spread, of course. I went back to Italy a couple of times to give testimony to the lawyer. And again, so it was that experience, I think, kind of, although I had grave misgivings about what we'd done that day, particularly the way the protesters had attacked that Jeep in the first place, I wasn't on side with that, and never will be. That seemed to cement, my feeling that this was, the right fight, in a way that I hadn't really felt that about the army, to be honest, and the sort of the side to be on, if that answers your question.
So, we're having some technical issues there, but it's been very illuminating, I don't want to say inspiring because I already said it, but it does give me a lot of hope. So, I'll take a little pause for now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how that touch of internationalism inspired a lot more to come.
Sure.
All right.